Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So check this out. I got me a new light and I think I got it on Amazon, and I was flipping through all the different colors, and well, let me get through it. It's just got like this huge array. Isn't this wild? So what was funny is bright green and a blue. Isn't that cool? I don't film inside a lot in my Jeep, as y'all know, but let me get through this clicking. So I bought this and I normally put it on just a soft, warm white light, and I thought, let me just check out these colors again tonight. So I was flipping through and I landed on this. Maybe I'll show you at the end of the video, but it's this like neon green, like a tropical rainforest frog color, and I don't know, I think it's kind of nice. So I'm gonna leave it on that. But if you see anything weird, like if my teeth are actually green and I haven't figured that out yet, I promise I brush my teeth. So it's just it's fun. It's so much fun. It's the little things, right? But check it out, my eyes look green now. Right? They're normally blue. So I just encourage you to find joy in the little things, because life is short. Life is short. And yes. So I hope it's been a good day for you. I normally film earlier in the day, but it was a great day. I actually had a phone call. I caught up with some friends that I don't get to talk to very often. They moved across the country many years ago, and I'm very blessed that they still stay in touch with me. And so I enjoyed that time with them earlier today on the phone, and just a couple of other things that were unexpected but were great. Just a pop-up show that I wasn't expecting during the day. I enjoyed that. So I just hope that you have some pleasant surprises, that you allow time for that in your life, which was something I was sharing with my friend in conversation. You know, it's one thing to be a planner, and that's great, but good too to have that balance, you know, where you just allow for some magic in your life, right? So anyways, let me go ahead and open up the message today with this. So I received several necklaces from my grandmother when she passed away. This is one, and then this as well. And this is going to be a great example for you all of what it means to operate with a handicap in your awareness. I don't even know if that's the right word to use here, but like your awareness is impaired, essentially, right? Especially after, or extremely so when you're in the midst of psychological abuse. But even afterward, you're still trying to work on rebuilding that, right? Your awareness. So we're going to talk about what is awareness, what does that mean, and this is going to be a wonderful example of that. So if you look, the way this necklace is constructed, there's these little metal pieces here that run from a loop on this side through the bead, right? And then comes out on the other side with another loop, and then you just kind of take each one that has a bead, you know, on the little portion of metal, and you just take the loops and you hook them together, right? Well, something happened. There was one bead that was missing. I don't know. I feel like it got stepped on or crushed or something. I don't know. But for a long time, you guys can look in some of my older videos, even some recent ones, where I've been wearing this necklace for some time with this gap. Okay. In fact, you can tell it's right here because these two are the same. And all throughout the rest of the necklace, there's variation, right? When two beads are next to one another. Well, here, these two are the same because there used to be another space between them with a different bead, and that was the bead that got crushed. Okay, I promise there's a moral to the story. There's a reason for this. I kept wearing this necklace for I don't know how long, for a very long time. She's been gone several years. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, one of these days I'm going to make it to the craft store. I'm going to, you know, well, I've been looking, but, you know, one day I'm going to find a bead that will fit in with the rest of these beads, and I'm going to buy it and I'm going to fix it. And that was the extent of what I thought about fixing that necklace, right? It never occurred to me that all I had to do was just take that little portion, that little metal insert out of the chain, and then just hook those other two pieces together. And then there's no longer a gap in the chain, in the necklace. Never occurred to me. So there's just a little example of being very, I don't know if you call it short-sighted, narrow-minded, not seeing the obvious, blind, oblivious, so many different ways you can say this, right? But it's certainly relevant to a discussion on awareness. So, I've shared this other example, the story with you all before, and it's been a while back. And I don't remember where I heard this. If I read it, I feel like I saw a psychologist, or there was a YouTube video of a psychologist sharing this story. I don't think it was Les Carter. It may have been. I don't remember. But the point was, there was, in the story that was being shared, there was a young man that was old enough. I don't remember if he was, I think he was old enough to work. If I'm not mistaken, he was in his 20s or 30s. And he was still living at home with his parents. And look, no judgment there. But here's the meat of the story. It's this. His parents were having a problem with it because he wasn't contributing at all. Like, he wasn't picking up after himself, even taking care of his own laundry, like nothing, okay? And I may be getting this story wrong too. This is just recalling off the top of my head to illustrate a point, okay? But that, they were all working together, I think, with this psychologist and trying to get this young man, motivated, to do for himself, to have some gumption in life. And what he started doing was he would bring his laundry in or something like this, and instead of bringing it all the way into his room, he would just sit it in the hall and then walk around it for, weeks on end. Now, I have been guilty of this from time to time. I'm not gonna lie, but it's stuff like this that, it's even stuff like if you set something in your way because you intend, I'm looking at something right now that's in my way, that you intend to, hey, I brought it in here closer to the door because I'm going to move it out here outside or whatever. It's kind of like, if it would take 5 minutes to go ahead and do what you need to do, why would you not just go ahead and do it? Versus it inconveniencing you for weeks on end, and you just continue to, inconvenience yourself, stumbling over it, walking around it or whatever for a long time. It's just odd things like that is not, I'm not sharing any of this to be judgmental by any means, because again, I can relate to this somewhat, right? But I think that as far as awareness goes, these kinds of things are great indicators of when we are, that's an area that's out of balance, when we have a need to work on our awareness. And so we're going to have a discussion on awareness today and how that gets totally thrown out of balance when you deal with somebody who's psychologically abusive and all this stuff, okay? So what happens is when you deal with somebody who doesn't have good intentions, so many different ways we can describe these people, right? But essentially, there's like this spirit in these people who are not genuine and authentic. That's like a spirit of nothingness or deadness, okay? I call it the spirit of decay. Now with them, this type of characteristic that they have, which is why they're described a lot of times as being robotic, is by choice. It's by choice, but it's almost like this spiritual plague that spreads through them onto us. And so when that happens, it's like what makes us whole and of substance spiritually, and as far as like energetically and life force like, that part of us gets stolen, and suddenly we have caught this spiritual virus, you might say, of nothingness or of deadness, of being frozen, like I talk about a lot, which is identified as a trauma response or whatever it is. And that's when it's like your mind is arrested. Your mind takes on this position of of working in such a way that, like what I just described with you all with my necklace and with the young man. It's like things that are obvious to others suddenly are no longer obvious to you. It's like it slows your cognition. It's a really strange thing. So the intact, healthy structure and mechanics of your mind are greatly affected. Okay? And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to expand on that. Let me just go ahead and also just take pause here and take a moment to say anything at all I share on my videos on my channel. If you're watching my videos and you enjoy them and you're a regular viewer, I know some of you and some of you I don't, but just please know none of anything that I say is ever meant in a negative way towards you, towards my viewers, ever. And I want to say that because when I was healing, when I was going through some tough times and I was, on my path, on my journey, and I was healing and trying to get my mind in the right place, sometimes we can misunderstand things in such a way that we are self-critical and we think that certain statements or things apply to us when they don't. So I just want to say that. I think it's, kind of part of just being, a humble person too, but just please don't just judge yourself. And this is something that is so easily done and almost automatic with us. If you've ever been on the receiving end of projection or what they call blame shifting or bullying or anything like that, right? And of course, they just add to that, these abusers, when they, go on top of it and they say you're sensitive, you're overly sensitive or whatever it is, So they just totally condition us and shut us down in every way when we try to, assert, hey, something's wrong. It's like they try so hard to make us believe it's us. So I just, if you're in that place, just please know nothing I say is meant towards anyone who's, trying to learn and grow whatsoever. So, and, I think that if you've ever had that kind of experience, you're probably like me. When you're talking one-on-one, communicating with somebody, you probably really appreciate very straightforward communication. I know I do. I've never been good at what they call reading between the lines, ever. And unfortunately, it's when that's hard for you, I feel like manipulators really just latch onto that and exploit it and deliberately use that against us. It's just something to think about. Just a heads up that I'm about to use my microphone and it's a little louder, so you may want to turn the volume down to start with. Here's how I would define awareness, just simply put, okay? To me, awareness means that we have that we're aware that we have different levels of consciousness simultaneously at work within each of us, within each of our minds all the time. So it's kind of like, and the reason I say that is because that's true for me. It's kind of like before my awakening, you might say, whatever you want to call it, before I was really aware, okay? I never had any kind of thoughts about the different levels of consciousness within the human psyche. I just went about my day. I just, did my usual stuff, just get up, breakfast. And then when you're a parent, you have, your child that you're, focused on and your meals and your house and your job and your, hobbies. If you have your hobbies, that's it, And then, of course, I've always had interest in psychology, but it would be way on the back burner and just different topics and all this. My point is, when you have crossed paths, especially if you've been affected for some period of time with a con artist, with a manipulator, a psychological abuser, a liar, whatever. And you wake up and realize that you have been snowed over. It just totally makes you understand that, especially in hindsight, when you see the red flags and you're like, how did I miss that? How did I miss that? And I missed that. But on the inside, it's like you can remember something feeling off, which, I just did a video about. But for me, I just started really understanding, all the stuff I've read about throughout, my life, especially like with Carl Jung and everything, talking about the human psyche. It's like it just came to the forefront of my attention. Like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. How, our experiences somehow get logged, I feel like, somewhere in our mind, but they can bypass the conscious awareness part. In other words, the part that would catch our attention and actually move us to action. Why? Why is that? And so that's going to be a big part of the heart of the message today. So, and of course, if you've gone through this, you'll already know this, but I'm just going to share for validation. Hopefully it's validating for you, for me to share this. Signs that you have awoken or you are awakening, right, would be, this is just what I experienced. I've never really cared for small talk, but especially now, it's like I just really don't have tolerance for small talk. And passion in general for life, for the little things, just to be alive, just to have your sanity and your peace, passion in hobbies, passion for friendships that are true and real, all of that will increase. Your passion for things will increase. Your life becomes richer. It almost feels like a second chance, at life. And I would say this has been true for me, you become open to the concept of magic, and you start to actually understand that when people talk about spell work and how that there are spells or whatever, you start to actually understand like the logical part of that. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that there's not some numinous aspect as well. I'm not saying that. Again, a lot of my truths now are not based on a black and white type thinking, an either or, but more like a both and, like paradox. I tend to find more truth in paradox. When you have that expanded thinking that allows for, both sides of the spectrum to actually fit and support, the larger truth. But it's like, that's part of waking up, I feel like, is understanding that you were under a spell. You were brainwashed. Your mind, again, was arrested, right? So, yeah. And it's kind of weird because it's like when you go through all that and you've come into this new kind of awareness, you understand that there are other people who, when you try to talk to them, it's like they just, you can't, you're almost like speaking two different languages, sort of. And so, in a way, it can be kind of frustrating. It can be invalidating if you're not careful, if you're expecting. Always watch those expectations. They're dangerous. But if you're expecting another person to just understand, someone that maybe you've been friends with a long time, but you went through some stuff and maybe they haven't gone through anything like that. And then you come out of it and you're trying to share your experience and they just can't wrap their mind around it. Well, they just can't. They just can't. And so these experiences change you in that way. It's almost like they put you into some kind of club, like this, but it's not like you wanted to be there. It's just an accident, right? And so, again, back to defining awareness. I talked about the different levels of consciousness, being able to grasp something in the present moment awareness. And then also, I want to talk about things that steal our awareness. So, I've talked about this book before by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about just logically placing the things that we do into different quadrants. And I forget which quadrant means what, but essentially, and you can probably Google it, 4 quadrants, Stephen Covey, and you'll see. But there's one quadrant that's like I think he calls it like a fire alarm quadrant, where it's things that we do that actually take up a lot of our time, that we tend to react to and give a lot of priority to, but in reality, when you step back and look at them, they really didn't need to have that level of priority or that much time invested. But for whatever reason, they kind of just, it's kind of that whole squeaky wheel gets the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I don't know, but it's kind of like that concept. And so it just means stepping back and taking a look at things. But those kind of things can just keep us distracted. And distractions in general, can really keep us like, being in a particular situation or in a conversation. It's kind of like you're there, but you're not present. See? So if you're physically somewhere, but your mind is somewhere else, then you're not really aware of what's even going on in front of you. So that's something that can steal your awareness. And then, of course, trauma. Going through having your mind manipulated has lingering effects even on your awareness, right? Because your mind is altered. Literally, your cognition is affected, right? And on top of that, as far as the lingering part, you can be stuck in these loops in your mind trying to make sense of things, but also you can get into these negative like feedback loops where if you were shamed and blamed and all this other stuff you went through, if you truly believed that and took those things to heart, they can just kind of play in your mind and keep you focused on them as well instead of the present moment. It's stealing the present moment from you. And what is life if it's not the present moment? That is life. That's where life happens, right here and now, the present moment. So that's what's being stolen from us, right? So awareness really is a big deal. But I personally still believe that our subconscious is always noticing everything, right? That everything is registering. But even though they're registering at somewhere in our psyche, subconscious, unconscious, whatever, it's like when you have either distractions or you have these lingering effects of trauma or whatever it is, the things that you are experiencing and observing in your present moment, somehow, even though they're locked back here, they don't pass through this veil to the top portion of your conscious awareness. They don't float up for you to consciously grab onto and with your conscious awareness to become aware of. It's like they just bypass that somehow, right? and just stick back here. So so that's not good. And there's also something that I want to bring attention to in this conversation, because I think that in our efforts to understand what we went through and to learn and grow, we don't give a lot of attention to this. And I think, honestly, that if we do, it will serve only to our benefit, to nourish us and to help us heal, so that it'll have an effect as well on our awareness and on healing our mind. And that is the concept of neglect. The fact that we were neglected. I looked up in the online etymology dictionary the term neglect, and it says from the 1580s, it's an act of treating with slight attention, right? And then in Latin, it's from the word nec, neclegere, legere, neclegere, or legere. So ne means no, or not, or without. And then you have the middle portion of the word, the Latin term, negligere, which is leg, which means to speak. And then you have ere, which means to row or propel. This is important here, okay? Because again, I described the spirit that these people have, that they project onto us, like in this spiritual virus type of way or disease type of way. It's a spirit of decay, of blockage, of stagnation, of blocking that energetic flow, that life force energy. And so, yes, so neglect is not to speak or propel. It's just a stone wall. Just that's it. Puts a stop to things, right? Puts a stop to the flow of life, even the circle of life mentally. This is where we can get stuck in depression or hopelessness, because that's part of the flow, is the circle of life. Is even just subconsciously or unconsciously we understand that it's God's design, and it's benevolent to have the death or the life and then death and then life once again portion of this flow, right, of what it means to live. And what does the devil do? In the Bible it says he comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right, or to bring something to an end. So it's like, I feel like if this spirit had its way, it would have us to believe that it's not a circle of life, but that it's just a life within death, and that's it, and that the spirit gets the final word. That death is the end all be all, but that's not the case. And that's observable. Even when a flower dies, there's a seed for rebirth. It's just the design. And so, I just want to encourage you, because, we're meant to have recovery after trauma. There's meant to be life after death, or renewal or rejuvenation, right? So we need to recognize the areas of neglect that we experienced, okay? This might be affection, intimacy. And when I say intimacy, I'm not talking about like the physical affection part. That would fall under affection, or just physical touch, right? But intimacy meaning just an openness, a shared, from the heart, a transparency, empathy, that's reciprocated and shared, and like an emotional type intimacy, right? So there's affection, intimacy, honesty. We weren't given that. We were neglected in that area. We weren't told the truth, or the whole truth. So I feel like to validate our own experiences keeps us grounded in reality, okay? And that's what they don't do. That's why if you have this experience with this person and you remember it one way, you can tell the difference if you're with someone and they remember it differently. There's still an authenticity to the conversation versus when you're sharing something with a person with bad intentions who's gaslighting you to try and manipulate you from trusting your own memory. There's a difference. So, it's important for there to be this open flow of communication between two people, to validate your own reality, to keep you sane. Because normal conversation also should bounce like back and forth. You know what I mean? Being supportive of one another, building on a concept. With these people, it's just there's this blockage. You throw something out there and they block it, and you're either going to get something negative back, or you're just going to get sometimes they just give you a barrage of questioning. There's never anything of substance that comes from them. It's like there's a deadness, literally, to this person's spirit. They're a shell almost. And so there's not anything, you can't go back and forth with them in a healthy way, you know what I mean, like a normal conversation. And if you've been isolated for a long time, you may forget what that's like. and then start to normalize it and think you're the problem and all this. That's why it's important to try and keep some type of socialization, with other people, so that you can keep perspective, to know what's healthy and what's not, right? They don't want that, because that's a bridge to sanity, see? And that equates in their mind to a potential loss of their control, over you. So, but, yeah, and we're, we suffer because we're deprived of the knowledge of how this darkness operates. The language, you might say, of this darkness. We're deprived of understanding it. But now that we know it, of course, it can serve as our protection. You come into, as part of your awareness, the reality that truth really is stranger than fiction. And, we dismiss so much simply because we rewrite or we rescript things to fit into the paradigms or belief structures that we already have in place. And I believe this to be an automatic process, not a conscious one. Not something that we do with our conscious awareness, but just an automatic thing, just part of human nature. It's kind of like if something comes along, think of our minds like a computer. If it comes along and passes through that structure and it's like, doesn't compute, it's like it doesn't compute if it doesn't match. This new thing comes along, there's nowhere for it to land. If there's nothing familiar there, then it's like it doesn't compute. You know what I mean? But when we wake up, you might, again, this is like a visualization. You might think of it like our old paradigms being shattered. And, a paradigm, I feel like is necessary, or a belief structure is necessary. It's just a normal part of, what's created within the human mind as you learn and grow, just developmentally. But in the same way, even though it's necessary to operate in this reality, it's also confining. It's like this barrier, right? That's kind of covering our mind. This overlay, just like a dome, and it's trapping the limits of our mind within certain constraints. You see what I'm saying? But when you go through this crazy stuff and your mind is manipulated, it just shatters that all to pieces, right? And then when you that's why when you try to go and share this stuff with people who haven't gone through this stuff, if they can't understand it, it's because they're still, their paradigm domes, you might say, are still intact, right? And we're not powerful enough to shatter that, and I don't even know that we'd want to, because it's not always pleasant waking up. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's a rough experience, So everybody has to walk their own path. We all do, each one of us. And you may see, a loved one of yours, going down this path, and you may see all these doors left and right of them, and you're like, man, if you would just turn your head and look, there's an opportunity to see the truth about this person that you're married to, or your friend or whatever. You can see from your perspective, but they can't, And so they're never going to stop and knock on those doors if, just because you're prompting them to. It's just got to be their own discovery, right? So we have to let that go. We have to just understand that not everybody's going to understand us, from that point forward. And yes, at times it can make you feel lonely, but the beauty is when you do find people who understand you, I feel like there's an opportunity for even deeper connection, and that's a beautiful thing. So, yeah. We need to understand that it's really beautiful. It's a big deal. It's a big deal that essentially what we went through had the capability of destroying us mentally and possibly physically. depending on your circumstances. And we survived. So there's an article I'm going to share a link with you all down in the description here. And it's from the American Psychological Association's website. And it's talking about solitary confinement, because that concept came to my mind today when I was thinking about what happens to our minds when we are for a long period of time exposed to someone who is manipulating our mind. It's almost like mentally going through something very similar to solitary confinement. It's just in solitary confinement in the prison system, it's an actual literal physical thing. But when you are mentally psychologically abused, it's like it's happening just here. Okay, which is why a lot of times you hear people coming out of those kind of situations describing it like a feeling like they were, frozen or imprisoned or whatever. Okay, so there's a statement in this article I'm going to share with you all that says, for some prisoners, solitary confinement precipitates a descent into madness. It's that big a deal. And these are institutions that are meant to reform a person, right? So there's a person that I guess was interviewed for the article, and says that he served 18 years, and 10 of those years in solitary confinement. And it says for a murder that he didn't commit. Can you even fathom? But he said that he had watched guys come to prison totally sane, and then 3 years later, they don't even live in the real world anymore. So, I feel like this force, whatever it is, this evil force of darkness, when you go through it, it's like it throws you over to one side of the spectrum or the other. Either it throws you into insanity, depending on the extent and the period of time or whatever that you were, your mind was under this influence or this spell. The extreme end over here would be insanity. And then the other end of the spectrum would be just a hyper consciousness, right? Or amplified awareness, you might say. Okay, and trauma can do those things to you. So, if we can learn to value, if you came out of it and you have your sanity, that's a wonderful thing. And, the awareness can be a gift depending on what we do with it. And so, if we can learn to value it, it's like being gifted with this whole brand new perspective, right? I definitely believe there's going to be some benefits. So, I encourage you also, let me just close with this, not to dive so deep into research that you neglect the neglect within yourself that is still waiting to be tended to. I'm going to give you some examples, okay? So like I mentioned earlier, how did I word it? Affection. So like physical touch, right? You may have gone many, many years in a relationship, be it, with a family member or a spouse or whatever it was, where, you rarely ever felt a loving touch, physical touch. And so, I'm going to share something I have with you all. There's this this band that you can wear on your shoulders across your back, and this particular brand is called Straighten Up, with an 8 in it, Straighten Up. And you just hold your arms up and you slide this down, and it goes across your back. There's a buckle that fits across your back, and then you kind of, it's kind of awkward to put on, but you slide it down your arms, you put it over your shoulders, and then you kind of fan it out over your shoulders, and it pulls your shoulders back, right? Like if you work on a computer a lot and you kind of, slouched over. Well, the cool thing about this, it's not just meant to correct your posture. It feels amazing. It brings your shoulders back and down, and it just feels so wonderful, and it kind of feels like a hug. You know what I mean? It's so comforting. And so I got to thinking about dogs, that are very anxious during storms and like thunder and lightning, and how they make these fitted, weighted vests for dogs, to comfort them, to feel, wrapped up. And they even make weighted blankets for us too. And so I just encourage you to look into things like that. You know what I mean? Just to replicate as you can, as you're able to, the comfort that, a person feels from, like a hug, from physical touch. And so I just encourage you to look into something like that, a fitted vest, or just a cozy jacket, or something like what I've got, which I love. If the neglect that you experienced was more like not ever feeling seen or heard, just totally invalidated constantly and ignored, or stonewalled, or given the silent treatment, things like that, which is horrible. There's all kind of groups online, as you know, and if you've ever tried that before, you may have just cut a trail like I have. But it's really a trial and error kind of thing. I just encourage you not to give up. You'll eventually find, a group that feels welcoming and safe and all those kind of things. And there's groups like Toastmasters, that are all, people who are all, the foundation for the group is rooted in the desire to encourage one another. Those are the ones that really are wonderful to me. The ones who the founder is always, reminding everybody to be kind to one another, and it's just heavily moderated and things like that. You know what I mean? Just groups like that. So it really is trial and error. I just encourage you to keep at it. And it does take effort. But just if you feel called, I just encourage you to journal on that. Spend some time thinking about, how long did you go? Really, how long did you go without being seen or heard, or without a loving touch? You know what I mean? So just be good to yourself. Be good to yourself, and just make sure that you notice those areas and do what you can. It's worth the effort to fill in those gaps for yourself. So thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again very soon.